Well, good morning to you all on Thursday, the 23rd of August. Come September the 1st, New South Wales will have a new police commissioner, Andrew Scipione. No problem about the bloke. He's a good fellow, more academic than police active. I'm not too sure how many angry people he's had to confront in his police career, but he's about to find out, I think. For the last 24 hours, I've been trying to speak to him about whether or not we're going to cave in to protesters and allow them to march in the APEC week, September 7 and 8, just because they decided they are the days on which they want to protest. The process in this is both straightforward and unacceptable. Basically, protesters just have to give 7 days or more notice to the police commissioner of their intention to, in the words of the legislation, hold a public assembly, and that's it. You're not allowed in this precinct, but they will be. When I asked to speak to the police commissioner in waiting this morning, we were told they didn't want to flag too much in terms of how they'll respond to the protesters. Say that again. In terms of how they'll respond to the protesters. So in Andrew Scipione's first assignment, has he already caved in? Why should the protesters be given approval to march or assemble just because they want to? Our police and security resources are stretched to the limit in that week. Forget the sickening spectacle for 21 countries who are our guests and who are amongst our leading trading partners. Let me tell you this, of these 21 APEC members, 8 are in our top 10 export markets. 95% of our beef and veal is sold to these 21 APEC countries. 82% of our iron and steel exports go to these 21 APEC countries. These 21 APEC countries provide 8 of the top 10 sources of international visitors to Australia. 70% of all international visitors to Australia come from these 21 APEC countries. 1/3 of Australians born overseas were born in these 21 APEC countries. I'd be down on bended knee saying, please spend a few more $1 billion with us. Instead, we've got the spectacle of what happened last year at the G20 summit in Melbourne. Frightening. Barricades burnt, police pelted with bottles and garbage. We've only got 14,000 police. Do we need the army? There's no reason why these people should be allowed to march. Under legislation available to the police commissioner, he can apply to the Supreme Court for an order preventing the march going ahead. Now, that itself is a nonsense, a whole heap of rigmarole that the government doesn't decide, the Lord Mayor doesn't decide. The legislation assumes that protesters can march just by giving 7 days' notice unless the commissioner goes to the courts. Well, when the police are saying they don't want to flag too much in terms of how they'll respond to the protesters, does that mean we'll be taking the pigeon-livered approach and saying, oh, well, you want to march, we'll let you march, thousands of you? School kids co-opted out of high schools. One outfit's already visited 20 Sydney public and private high schools to recruit students. Where does the national interest sit here? Where are the views of the rest of the community represented in what the Commissioner in waiting is going to do? How about listening to the law abiders, not the law breakers? And they'll say emphatically, let this lot march. Tell them they'd be welcome on the 20th and the 21st of November. Tell them they can't be trusted to behave in APEC week. Tell them our police and security services are not going to be made frontline fodder for their violence. Make an application to the Supreme Court to argue that case. And if there's a $600,000 water cannon which we've purchased, use it. If it can knock protesters off their feet, if they defy the law in numbers, use it. Because it's clear that whether the march is sanctioned or not, in open defiance, they'll try to come. Well, there's the test. Will we have Redfern and Macquarie Fields revisited, police on the back foot, and the pictures going around the world? If there's a 12,000-litre tank with shatterproof glass and a push bar in front that can clear barricades and other obstacles, use it. Or will we be too pigeon-livered to do that? Remember one thing, the rabble and the ferals are watching. If we haven't got the bottle to go to the Supreme Court now, it's clear we most probably won't have it when it's needed in APEC week. And yet again, the 99.9% of citizens who are law-abiding will be treated to another spectacle of another cave-in. Protesters deciding when they protest makes a mockery of police powers and the rights of the majority. Andrew Scipione's first job to test his mettle will be to get off to the Supreme Court and make application that approval not be given. 2 points. 1, the police commissioner is not the government. These powers should belong to the government. And 2, if the police are the ones charged with doing the job, they should have the power to determine approval or otherwise, not be racing off to be repudiated by a court decision. The process is confused. Imagine what the consequences will be like. I'm Alan Jones.